Join us on a journey where we unravel the latest trends, tackle your burning questions, and explore innovative strategies that are shaping the future of compensation, all with a cup of coffee in hand. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Comp and Coffee, where we dig into the conversations that matter most in compensation, HR, and business strategy. I'm your host, Ruth Thomas, Chief Compensation Strategist here at Payscale. And today we're going to be thinking a bit about how compensation strategy is shifting and how compensation as a strategic lever is becoming increasingly important and the part that data has to play in that. We're going to talk about how smarter, faster insights powered by AI are really important today. And we're unpacking what it really takes to build strategies that align with performance, retention, equity, and growth. So I have two wonderful partners today joining me. I have Rebecca Toman from Pearl Meyer and Sara Hillenmeyer from Payscale. Now, Rebecca, hopefully I said your last name correctly, but you are new to the podcast, so thank you very much for joining us. We've just launched a new partnership with Pearl Meyer. So I'd love you to introduce yourself to the listeners, tell them what your role is, and a little bit about our relationship with Pearl Meyer.
Certainly. So I am with Pearl Meyer. We are a leading executive compensation and leadership and development consulting firm. And our purpose is to help organizations build, develop, and reward high performance leadership teams. And within Pearl Meyer, I oversee our survey practice. So we conduct over 50 annual surveys every year. And these cover a wide range of industries and range from getting great market data from everybody from interns and new college graduates all the way up to the CEO and leadership teams.
Great. Thank you very much. Sara, welcome back to the podcast. Do you want to remind the listeners about who you are and what your role is here at Payscale?
Sure. Thanks for having me back, Ruth. My name is Sara Hillenmeyer. I have a deep technical background.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
Background in data, statistics, and artificial intelligence. I've been building data and AI-enabled tools in compensation, medicine, and other industries for more than 15 years. At Payscale, I lead our AI and data insights teams within the research and development organization.
Thank you, Sara. Well, welcome back as well. Okay, so let's start. I wanted to start our conversation around thinking about compensation as a business strategy. It's a conversation that we probably think is always going on, but isn't always executed well. So I'm interested to dig in and explore there as a starting point. So, Rebecca, how are leadership teams and boards started to think differently about executive pay as a lever for business growth now today?
So now more than ever, executive pay, it's used as a tool to both drive and reinforce the company strategy and help to motivate the leadership team to achieve those long-term objectives and goals. And we are seeing it used as a lever for growth in areas that are beyond just the financial metrics. So, linking pay to strategic outcomes that may or may not be financially based, such as innovation, transformation, things like market expansion, leadership and development objectives as well. We're also seeing more flexibility in incentive structures, and that's to account for those unforeseen events that come up. Also, greater transparency and more clear communication, and just overall a focus on a greater link between that company mission and strategy and pay.
So is that what you monitor in your surveys? Is one of the things you monitor the different metrics that people are using in executive pay, or are you monitoring the rates of executive pay?
Certainly, Ruth, we do both. So we do annual compensation surveys that track pay over time. And then we also do some more trend-based surveys each year to say, what are those executive pay practices that are new and different and changing?
Right. So what you're seeing is new metrics coming in that are like trying to be more transformational in terms of innovation. That's an interesting one, Sarah, isn't it? Like to see organization focusing more on innovation in terms of their go forward and growth strategy.
Exactly. And the financials are still critical, but we're seeing other areas as well.
Great. And what kinds of strategic decisions are being shaped by exec comp data now? Like how are they using the data that Pearl Meyer provides?
Yeah. So the area that comes up when I think about, changes in strategy, one shift we've seen is greater focus on retention. So companies are more focused on finding that appropriate balance between performance on one hand and retention. And they're starting to realize that retention is a perfectly good objective for a compensation program to have. And it's a business necessity. It's not just, an area for, HR to be concerned with, but that it should really be something that is proactive, a strategic component of pay that helps companies meet their long-term goals versus something that is just used in a reactionary fashion.
Great, thank you. Now, Sarah, that's something we think about too in terms of our data and how organizations can use that as a strategic lever. What do you see, how can your compensation data strategy drive key business outcomes?
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear Rebecca's perspective on this at the exec level. Those are really great examples, and really even at the boots on the ground level, it's the same story.
Right.
Retention is really important. It is very expensive to replace your workers, whether they're your exec leadership team or they're a nurse in your hospital. Rule of thumb, and this certainly doesn't apply to all jobs, is that you end up spending about 1.5 times as much money when you're replacing a key worker. And that the compensation strategy that you use can influence both the retention piece and of having to replace those workers that you want to keep less often, but also the time to fill that role, that key role for your business. If you're offering a very competitive salary, the time to fill the role is generally lower, which can mean that you're achieving those business objectives faster. So it really does give businesses a big, powerful lever in achieving their strategic goals to think about compensation strategy as a way to drive towards those goals.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we're talking about retention of strategy with the headlines that potentially we're seeing at the time that we record this, and in the context of like layoffs in certain sectors and announcements coming out from large organizations about how AI is going to impact the numbers of people they employ. For me, I think the word key talent is what's important here, because I don't think in my lifetime we're going to be in a world where there are no people in an organization and it is all agents or bots. So what we really need to do is, as we make that shift between potentially operationalizing big portions of work in organizations with AI, is then thinking about the key talent that you need to make that successful. I think retention is going to be an ongoing problem. And as you say, Sarah, the cost to that key talent who are going to be the real people that are fueling growth and transformation in your organization is always going to be critical. Okay, so we started talking about data. We're in an age now with an explosion of data, and there is so much data. It's so much easier to find pay information now. Your Google will very happily, return you a pay range. I don't know how easy it is to Google executive comp information. I don't think I've really tried that to the same degree, Rebecca. But what is becoming increasingly important is how do we navigate through that volume of data and get to trusted data? So that's something I wanted us to explore about. So, Rebecca, can you talk us through how Pearl Meyer ensures data credibility, especially when it's informing board level decisions? Because they really are going to drill into the quality of the data.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of what me and my team does at Pearl Meyer in the survey practice. So, we conduct over 50 surveys each year. And when we get the submissions from the clients, then we start our quality process and we run that data through a number of checks. And we will flag outliers, we'll flag missing information, anomalies. And the client's work isn't done. Sometimes they wish they could be done, but they hear back from us and we ask them, hey, last year you matched your division CEO to the survey, but we don't see that business unit head this year. What happened? And they can tell us, well, we closed that division or we forgot. Here's that data. And sometimes, it's easy to make mistakes in job matching or, supplying the information. I have never seen a perfect submission in my time over 20 years working with surveys. So there's always a question to ask. And at Pearl Meyer, it's a real collaborative process where there's back and forth between us and the participants to make sure what we publish is of the highest quality. But when you think about the executive team and the board, that's a very discerning audience, that will be looking very, very closely. And when you're working with that audience, you can't just take, the raw data and base your decision on that, whether it's in surveys or peer data from proxies. You got to understand what's behind that data and not try to manipulate it to get the answer that you want. Rather, the role is to adjust the data to normalize it. So here I mean thinking about things like outliers or sign-on bonuses or special retention or awards. No, it's not the new normal. That's a one-off. And so we need to look at the data in that way. Sometimes what Pearl Meyer has to do, in the boardroom or with senior management is to step in because sometimes there's a CFO or a director who's decided to become an amateur consultant. And they'll say to us, I went back and I looked at the proxy and your numbers don't match the proxy. And it's like, well, no, our numbers don't match the numbers in the proxy. And let me tell you why.
Great. So it's that context around the data is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And where can it go wrong? Like, what are the common pitfalls when you see organizations that don't use data in the right way?
Yeah. So sometimes market data will get gains aid if it's not what management was expecting to see or wants to see with anecdotal data. So they may say, Sage walked into my office and she said that she's going to get this much money. There's always going to be examples where somebody makes more than the market, but for every example of someone who makes more, I can go out and find an example of somebody who makes less, but they never want to talk about that. So the challenge is to recognize the data for what it is. It's one piece of information for the committee and management to use to make their decision, but it's not the only piece of information that should be used. It's a normative range. And that's why when we work with clients, we tend to show them the 25th, the 50th, the 70th percentiles. It doesn't mean there aren't people that make less than the range or more. It's a central tendency. And there may be some really good and legitimate reasons to pay somebody more or less. But it's important that you have a process in place, a process that you can do year after year. And, that's kind of the problem with the anecdotal data is it's hard to repeat. When you have to do that benchmarking, in the next year, you need a process that's defensible, but also repeatable.
Yeah. Now, we think, Sarah, a lot about trusted data or data trust here, particularly also as we incorporate more AI within our product portfolio, trust in AI. What does data trust look like in practice, or AI trust look like in practice, and how does that translate into better decisions?
I like this question because you frame it as an AI question, but as Rebecca noted, Comp has been data-driven for a very long time, and the data quality has been really important during our whole journey with compensation as a society. And the same is still true. There are some extra pieces related to AI, but the foundation is basically the same. So when we think about AI models, using reliable data sources is the entry point. And that can mean different things for different applications. But if you're thinking about your structure modeling and benchmarking jobs, then using data that's reported from employers about how much their employees make is the foundation of having a very reliable and trustworthy data source. It's not to say for other use cases, you might want to look at aggregated job postings or similar, but that gold standard is still employer reported information about how much their incumbents make. The next piece, really similar to the survey process, robust data cleaning and normalization, making sure that those matches look good, making sure that the data that's submitted is consistent with what we expect in terms of outliers. One of the most common issues that we see, and I'd be curious to hear if you see it too, Rebecca, is that we'll get a submission and it'll be marked as an hourly salary, but it'll be $100,000. Right? And so somebody's making $100,000 an hour, right? And then when we go to convert that to an annual pay, it's like, whoa, that number's huge, right? So those kinds of, that's a pretty easy thing to catch, but those kinds of checks to make sure that the data submitted is exactly what the organization meant to submit in terms of the formatting and such. And then that same process of looking for outliers, removing those, or building methodology that's robust to that kind of outlier and can capture the variation without skewing the whole range. It's not abnormal for the 95th, 96th, 97th percentile of almost any job to make quite a lot of money compared to most folks in the role. So as we build AI techniques and algorithms, being robust and tolerant to those outliers is a piece of the puzzle, so that we can show that there really is a broad range here, or the range is more narrow, and there's one person somewhere that maybe isn't entered correctly. We want to be able to distinguish between those two scenarios and provide a good range. And then when we talk about AI and having reliable, trustworthy AI, the next piece of it is monitoring how well the models capture the variation in the data, and monitoring that over time. As we've talked about before, Ruth, every model that we build or that anyone builds is capturing the data that it was trained on. And as data changes, as pay changes, as the labor market changes, those models have to be retrained to capture the variation in the current scenario. So we're always looking for what we call model drift, of how well do the models that are in use in production that people are using? How well are they capturing the variation in new data that they haven't seen before? And as they start to dip in that accuracy, then we retrain to capture the variation again. So same steps with just one little like extra kick at the end that's specific to AI.
Yeah. And I guess that's, the comfort that anybody working with either, Pearl Meyer or, Payscale or a trusted, data supplier is that is part of what we're doing. That's what you're paying for in terms of when you come to us for data, is that data trust, the source of the data, and also helping you to understand the context of that data. So we seem to talk a lot about AI on this podcast now. I think if I wound the clock back a year ago, we maybe weren't talking about it so much, but you also can't go to an HR or comp event at the moment without people talking about HR. I see the podcast as a good opportunity for our listeners to learn about AI. We're thinking more and more about how AI impacts our product strategy and how it's going to change the world of compensation. So Sara, for you, as you reflect on world at work and everything that you learned when we were down there in Orlando, what's one area where AI is already making a measurable impact in comp strategy? Like the one thing that you can think of today where it's having the biggest impact?
The one thing, I had three things, Ruth, but I guess I'll just have to have another podcast.
Blend them for me. No, but go on. You can give me three things. I'll let you give me three things.
I think AI is a really great tool with a lot of value in low and no data market scenarios. So if you're opening the first healthcare clinic in Flat, Alaska, you need to hire a nurse with a specific certification. You can run as many surveys as you want. You're not going to get data back because there aren't any nurses in Flat, Alaska yet. And comp pros have developed expertise in triangulating the available data and inferring what that pay should be. But AI is also really good at this and good at recognizing the patterns from similar roles and from similar geographies. It can do that triangulation for you in a way that is very repeatable and consistent, job to job, market to market, year to year. So I think that's the place where I'm most excited about the power that AI can have in comp within the right now times.
Yeah. And Rebecca, how are you thinking about AI at Pearl Meyer? Are you seeing examples where blending AI with human insight has led to better outcomes, whether it's executive pay or broader compensation planning and management?
Yeah. So, I definitely consider Payscale a leader in this area. And it's been really great to see what you offer to your clients in terms of AI solutions. I can share, some areas where I've seen it used. One, pay equity audits. AI can be really helpful to identify statistical bias, as Sara mentioned, to uncover patterns. But it doesn't stop there. The human insight is needed to validate the outcomes, in this pay equity analysis. Is, they're in inequity because of performance issue or tenure or geographic location. So that's one example. But I think the area where I'm seeing it used most is in the benchmarking. So doing all of that work, to go through a full library of surveys, find the best matches compared to the descriptions, all that work, it's time consuming. AI can help. It's not perfect, right? But it can certainly save a lot of time.
Yeah, great. Thank you. One thing that we're kind of seeing very much as this AI story and compensation evolves is it's not going to totally replace the work of the total reward compensation HR manager of today. It's going to evolve their role. A lot of the work that took a lot of time will hopefully take less time, and they'll maybe have more time to think about the outputs and the strategic impact of what they're actually doing. What do you think? Are boards and executives starting yet to think about that and what they want from their comp teams? Do they want more from them than they did 5 years ago, do you think?
Yes, Ruth. And they want things faster. So, the timeline expectation has shortened. They want a greater degree of analytics, especially on the performance side of things. They want their advisors to be able to do scenario planning and what ifing. And historically, this type of work has taken a significant amount of time. But now there's that expectation that with AI, that advisors, and teams should be able to do better, faster work. And use AI to provide, multiple alternatives, multiple iterations of things without it taking weeks or months to do. So, for example, with the click of the button, Elsa, I want you to show me the difference between peer group A and peer group B. And what happens if we remove these three companies from the peer group and add these three in? Previously that was pretty laborious, but now with AI, it's becoming an expectation.
And what do you think, how do you coach clients, in terms of balancing data empathy and that business alignment that you were talking about?
So I think here it's where discretion comes in. So at the beginning of every year, companies really do try to go through a thoughtful process where they pick the performance metrics that are the most important. They set expectations around it. That's linked to, budgets and what the maximum awards are going to be. But it's also it's also aligned with the reality about what we know about our business at the time we're setting those goals. And especially in the world we're living in now, it's not a crystal ball. So that's where companies, they take their best guess and will often have the ability to use some discretion at year end. We have a new administration in the US, and there have been some, regulatory and some economic uncertainty. And that has led companies to, exercise some more discretion. And when the end of the year comes, we hope that all the goals have been met, all the objectives, are met. But sometimes things don't fall exactly where they're projected. And at that point, companies, they've got one of two choices. They could either say, it is what it is, and we're going to pay out based on what the plan said. And too bad, over the course of a career, sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. It's a wash, and leave it at that. Or if it's too far off the mark, sometimes a board will say, this just doesn't feel right. This, it just doesn't feel fair. And, while we might get some grief from ISS or Glass Lewis proxy advisors, for exercising discretion to increase incentive payouts, kind of to Sarah's point earlier, the incremental cost of the bonus, it's going to be far less than the cost of replacing that whole management team when they leave. And companies, they can use market data to determine, how often discretion is used and how much weight it should have. And we survey this every year at Pearl Meyer. We have a free executive compensation planning survey where we ask about, things that companies are looking forward to in the next year related to executive compensation, and discretion comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, I haven't lived in the world of exec comp for a while. I did for a few years. I think it's really interesting hearing you talk, because we are living in a very volatile kind of macro environment at the moment. And when you think about executive comp plans, they're often set in the context of 12 months. And so much, and even longer, obviously, in some cases, but normally like 12 months is the minimum. And so much is changing and happening in that time now. So as you say, having that flexibility, adaptability, and discretion to be able to react. I think that was the one thing I remember kind of learning out of the COVID years, where I'm working with quite a few customers where their bonus plans just like obviously blew up, and they had no sense of adaptability. They had no metrics in there that were going to help them out of the situation that they ended up in. And a lot of people then thought about, how do I build forward now and build adaptability into these compensation plans? So that seems to be something that you're talking about there.
Yep, great example.
So Sara, where do you think AI and tech are headed next? What can HR leaders expect, and what should they be doing to future-proof the work that they do in their pay strategies, do you think?
Yeah, as Rebecca noted, we've seen big gains in the benchmarking workflows from AI. I expect that to continue. I think that the process of finding the right data for your job, for whatever job you're trying to price, is just going to get easier and easier. It's certainly human oversight and a strategic lens there is important, but I think that will become less and less a part of a comp pro's day-to-day work as the tools get better and better. My advice there is to experiment, try new tools, and experiment with a critical eye, certainly towards evaluating whether the tool is operating in the way that you expect it to and is giving answers that are explainable. Like ultimately, if you're a comp person, you're on the hook for that, where that range came from. And so finding the right data assets and tools that can help you get to that good answer, but in a way that you can explain to your leadership team, you can explain to the board, here's where these numbers come from, as a counterbalance to those anecdotes that we know that they'll have. Norma came in and wants twice that. How do you answer that in with a defensible methodology and data? So experiment with this eye towards how you're going to explain this to the folks that you work with, whether that's your leadership team or your employees. The other thing I'll say is that the models are foundational models, and AI is getting better and better. So the tools you're using today are the worst they're ever going to be. So if something doesn't work the way you expect it to, try again in 6 months. And if you're evaluating tools from vendors like us, looking for both the way that they evaluate their tools internally, but also are they incorporating the leapfrog advances that are happening in the field into their tools? Are they updating those with, let's say, a match algorithm to incorporate that latest large language model technology? Or are they launching it and then forgetting about it and not maintaining it? That would be one kind of thing to consider. But stay agile. Basically, as Rebecca is saying, like, there is no set it and forget it. We have a future-proof strategy, and we never need to reconsider. That's a fool's errand at this point.
Yeah, and I think what's surprising me the most is the pace at which this is happening. We live in this space of HR tech and compensation tech. But, even as I think about how AI is being deployed through our roadmap, if I look back again 12 months ago, just like what you can now do in the product in terms of workflow enablement. Obviously there's AI deployed to data, but that just the workflow enablement and the benefits that's bringing to you. So, I do almost think now you need to be thinking ahead as a comp person in terms of, definitely what is the work that I want to do. Now, a lot of that work is being enabled, and then working with your vendors, I would suggest to help them to build those solutions of the future. Because I think the pace for me is what's quite surprising, is just how fast this is happening, how much change. I felt like we were talking about AI and robots and things for quite a long time, and then suddenly it seems to be, okay, we're hitting the ground running. We're seeing real use cases. We're seeing it turn up in our products. We're seeing it being deployed and really changing the work that's being done.
it's remarkable, and I say I've been doing AI since before it was cool. I finished my PhD before this very transformational paper came out called Attention is All You Need. That one came out in 2017 and set the groundwork for all of the large language models that exist now. And we were doing language modeling before that. We were trying to figure out how to do this. There's some older techniques that were state of the art then, and it really just has been this explosion within the last 7 years of things that we can do, especially with text, and both digesting text and understanding its meaning as a really important part of that. And is a little bit different in terms of the use cases than generating text or having a chat bot, but they're all coming from the same kinds of models, and really the pace of innovation on those foundational models has been exponentially fast, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. They're getting better and better.
Well, thank you. We've covered a lot today. I thought let's close out with a summary question. If there's one thing you'd like the listeners to take away from this episode today and all the different topics we've covered, Rebecca, what would be your one takeaway?
So I would say that, executive compensation is a powerful tool to reward performance, also to encourage retention. And market data and AI can help. They can help you do things, better and faster, help you focus on more strategic priorities. But your expertise and your judgment as a comp professional, it's critical. Your knowledge of your specific company, and that must be used in conjunction with the market data and with the AI.
Thank you. Yeah, so that context, thinking about the context all the time. And Sara, what would be your one takeaway for the listeners today?
It's really similar. Compensation strategy is business strategy. This is a way that you can drive your business forward, and the expectations are shifting. Data processing is table stakes, and being able to show up with a strategic story and lever that drives your business forward is the new rule, the new expectation for a person's job.
I love that. Compensation strategy is business strategy. And that's the loop that we're trying to close really now. And I think, everything that's happening in terms of transformation of data and technology is really getting us to that position where we can make that connection become a lot closer than we ever have done before. Well, thank you both very much for joining me today. We have nearly run out of time. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Sara, for sharing those insights today. And if today's conversation sparked ideas or questions, then we would love to hear from you, the audience. Tag us on LinkedIn or drop us a note at coffee@payscale.com, and you might just hear your thoughts in a future episode. So until next time, thank you both again, and keep the coffee hot and your comp strategy even smarter. Thank you very much.